This is the Happy House Hunters. This is our free meetup, and we are going through the 6 F's of real estate, January through December. We go through it twice because it's the 6 F's, so it takes 6 months. So we'll go through it through June, and then in July we start over. So the first session that we did last month was finding the real estate, and Stephanie did an awesome job about finding the real estate. And so for those of you that are on the call, that Stephanie is near and dear to you, to your heart, I do want to mention that she is in the hospital right now. She's having a bout of flu, not COVID, but flu, and so she's being well taken care of, and we can't wait for her to get back, and we wish her a speedy recovery. Yes, and Kyle is handling all of her deals in the meantime. And for those of you that do real estate full time, you know what that means for Kyle. He's doing his job and her job. And it's crazy busy out there. So that's how things are going. The Happy House Hunters started off as a Facebook group. For those of you that are new, we started off, oh gosh, several years ago. And there was a core group of us that would get together once a month in person. And fast forward a couple of years, and I put the group on Meetup. And once I put the group on Meetup, we just exploded and took off with a large membership. And we were meeting in person on this particular night in Columbus, Ohio, for those of you that aren't in Columbus, Ohio. And we were having 40, 50 folks in the room. And then, of course, the pandemic came along and the restaurants couldn't accommodate those size of groups. And so we, like everyone else, we made the segue over to virtual meetups. So right now we have 18 of us on the call. Last month we had close to 40. And so it is very popular. We appreciate everyone being here. And so in addition to the Facebook group and then us putting that group on Meetup, where you can find us either place, Facebook or Meetup under Happy House Hunters, I then started what was called the Kathy Binner International Academy, online academy. And I have a Happy House Hunters mastermind group. And and several of the folks on the call tonight are in my mastermind. And in that mastermind group, it's a $25 a month membership fee. But in that membership fee, you get the entire course called the 6 F's of real estate. And let's see if I can pull them out of the memory bank. It's finding, funding, fixing, flipping, filling, and finally freedom. I think I got those in the right order. And so you can get the entire course. It's included in that membership price, but it has all of these free calls. Replays are in the membership site. And then we do 2 mastermind meetups a month. One is called Boots on the Ground, where we actually take you through properties that are being rehabbed. And we show exactly what we're looking at, what we're looking for, and also how much we're spending, and then what we purchased the property for, and what it ultimately goes on the market for. And then the second call of the month, we're either working numbers, we're helping you work numbers, or we're just doing examples of all kinds of deals. Or now that everyone in the mastermind has progressed to where everyone almost has a deal under their belt, they're all at different stages of the finding, the funding, the filling. And so now we're answering questions in real time. So somebody said, is there a link for the mastermind? Go to Kathy Binner International Academy and then look for the Happy House Hunters Mastermind. So Kathy Binner International Academy, Happy House Hunters Mastermind. So again, feel free while Josh is talking, I'll get a link for you. But in the meantime, oh, we've got some more folks coming in. In the meantime, just make a note of that. So there is a way that you can connect more if you like what you're hearing here. So we're going to get started, and I'm going to turn it over to Josh, and he has quite a great story. So I would like for Josh to tell us just briefly his background before he launches into the topic tonight, which is funding. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, I real quick, I didn't know that your mastermind included all previous recordings of this meetup. So
Yes, it
that
does.
actually, that's probably some significant value because you guys have been putting this on for a while. And
Hmm.
I know pre-COVID, I was at several of the meetings. Definitely some good content. So that's cool. But yeah, thanks for having me. My name's Josh Hively. I am a real estate investor local to Columbus. Um, I know a handful of you guys on the group, but actually, one thing that I always find interesting about these meetings, or be it masterminds or whatever it is, um, each group kind of has its own circle, which I think is interesting. So I do actively try to kind of tap into the different circles just to expand my network. But um, a little bit of backstory, I guess. Um, I've been a full time real estate investor for close to 2 years now. Well, full time, probably a little over a year. Investing for about 2 years, so not as much experience as some of the other folks on the call, but we've been pretty aggressive. So um, prior to that, I have a professional background in like commercial facilities maintenance. I did a lot of really odd jobs. Prior to this, I was a bowling machine mechanic at one point, and I worked for several years on zip lines. So a lot of travel work there, doing structural inspections and those sorts of things. But yeah, just kind of like fixing stuff and fixing unique things, I guess. But yeah, once I guess my wife and I traveled a couple years ago, and we really got the itch for international travel. And then from that point, it was kind of just an exploratory phase of what is the most efficient way to get wealthy and to build generational wealth and be able to have that time freedom that I know a lot of folks are after. All roads kind of led towards real estate. Um, so that's the direction we went. Turns out real estate is very much a people business, and we'll talk about that a little bit tonight. But my particular personality is just prime for dealing and talking to people. So it worked out pretty well, and it's something that I'm pretty passionate about, and um, so far seem to be having a little bit of luck with. So
And you can follow Josh on his Facebook page as well.
yeah, I don't really have any links. I guess if you guys want to follow me, I can post in the chat. I'll put my contact info when we're done here in the chat. Um, but probably the easiest thing is I'm on Instagram at Josh Hively.
Okay.
But I can post some other stuff down in the chat. And I think let me see if I can share my screen here. I've got a brief couple of slides here that we can kind of run through. Kathy, you'll have to let me know if you can see this.
You want to share your screen, and it looks like it's coming up. Yes, we can see it.
Is that
Are you
are you
wanting
seeing this?
a different view? Should be at the bottom of
Um,
your page, should be just the reader view.
I've got two screens, so sometimes sharing gets a little. Are you seeing the funding real estate
Funding
deals?
real estate deals, yes, a 30,000-foot view.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, that's kind of the plan here. There's a lot of different ways to fund real estate deals. Um, we would be spending a lot of time if we tried to dive into each one specifically, but I think for tonight we can kind of do a 30,000-foot view and go over the the different strategies and kind of what options are available. Um, I guess I didn't say in my intro, I am a Homevestors franchisee here in Columbus. If you guys have questions about that specifically, I'm happy to answer them towards the end, but basically we buy ugly houses. So I guess I kind of boiled this down into six main types of funding.
Josh,
So
I have a
there's
question. Do you
Yeah.
mind if folks screen print if they're on their computer or on their phone and they want to take a screen print? Is that okay with you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And also
Okay.
I'm happy to send this to you, the slides to you afterwards, Kathy, and you can
Oh,
send out.
that'd be perfect. But
But
in the
yeah, if
meantime,
people want to.
if somebody wanted to take a screen print, Josh says you're welcome to do that. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, no problem. So yeah, I was just gonna say six main types of funding, at least as far as I see it. I looked up a couple different articles. Some people had like the three main types or the five subtypes or whatever it is, but this is kind of the way that I think about it. There's traditional mortgages, hard money, private money, cash, credit, and then there's kind of a catch-all at the end there of just creative. But I did I kind of put together this chart, and actually I was talking before we got on the call here a little bit with Kathy. A lot of times I like to do these presentations um, for myself because it gives me some time to kind of sit down and think through these things just in my own head. But I put together this chart, which I think is kind of helpful. Just where these things land as far as being easy or difficult to use, and then whether they're cheap or expensive. Um, I If you guys have any thoughts on this, I am kind of curious about feedback on this. I feel comfortable with where these bubbles landed, but it does kind of depend. There are some extenuating circumstances that can move one of these bubbles up or down or left or right. But this is kind of how I see it in my head, and at least the way that we use these different products. So we can just kind of go through the different types. And again, we'll do a Q&A at the end here. So I'm happy to field specific questions if somebody has them. But these kind of just generally speaking, so there's a couple different types of traditional mortgages. These are the loans that people are using to buy the houses that they live in, or if you're buying, a rental property, maybe if you're first or second or third rental property, you have some down payment, the property's in decent condition. A couple of the nice things about traditional mortgages, especially right now, interest rates are very low. I don't even know. They're in like the low twos or something.
Yes.
And we'll go higher than 2 in later categories, but 2% is pretty cheap money if you can get it. Availability, you can, if you meet all the right criteria, you can basically always get a traditional mortgage.
Josh, explain your abbreviations as you go. We could have some newbies on here that aren't familiar with what some of your letters mean.
Yeah, I will. And actually, I thank you for that. I missed one. So looking back to the FHA, if you're not familiar with that, those are basically government-backed mortgages. So the FHA is a loan product that's backed by the government. So there's a number of different things with those particular loans, but the main one being that you can get a significantly lower down payment, and the government is kind of supporting you in that decision. So that's the FHA. And then jumping back over to the pros, if you are using one of those FHA loans, you can buy a house if you plan to own or occupy with 3.5% down. Sometimes I think even a little bit lower. In some cases there are government-backed mortgages that go down to 0%, even like if you're a veteran or in some more rural areas, there's USDA loans that you can get for 0% down, which for a lot of people, 0% down is a big win. So that's kind of one of the nice things about those particular mortgages. You can kind of crank up that loan to value. In in the space that I normally deal in when we're buying properties, it's very difficult for us to use traditional mortgages. And there's a lot of different reasons why, but there's the cons list there. You need 3 to 20% down payment. So if you're going to try to buy a handful of rental properties in a single year and you need to put a 20-25% down payment on each one, that can kind of add up pretty quickly. The underwriters for those loans are going to want to check your personal information. They want to see your credit score. So if you have bad credit, you might not make the cut there. If you're a full-time real estate investor like me, verifiable income is dicey sometimes. The traditional mortgage process is not known for its speed. There's usually a lot of kind of hoops to jump through and a lot of papers to push, so they sometimes can take a while. I think even with COVID, those things have slowed down a little bit. You're seeing some of
Well, a lot of those
loans
folks are working from home on top of it.
Yeah, so they're like pushing the papers around their house, which and then I guess in the case of buying a distressed property, that can be a little bit tricky too. They're not going to give you money towards repairing the home. With the exception, there is an FHA product where you can get rehab funds, but that is probably the most difficult loan to process for a number of different reasons. I do not have any personal experience with that, so it is an option, but I think for most folks, it's not the best option. And then just different things like you're going to have to go through an appraisal. So they're going to want to verify, the value of the home, which sometimes they have a good opinion of the valuation. Sometimes they don't. And just scalability. So with, generally these types of mortgages, once they're initiated, they're sold on a secondary market. Two of the big buyers on that secondary market are Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So they have some limits in place about how many of these you can have in your name. I think it's 10. So if you're trying to buy 11 rental properties in your personal name, if you don't get caught up sooner than 10, you'll have trouble going to 11. So scalability can be a little bit of an issue there. And then needed repairs, if a house is leaning over or needs, significant foundation work or whatever it is, like some of the houses that we purchase, they're not going to want to put a loan on it because of the condition. Hard money loans, I did kind of break it up into two types, institutional and private. There are a lot of hard money lending companies out there. We are working with some currently. There are some local. Wildcat Lending has an office here in town. We're working with a company right now called Lending Home out of California. But there are also like private hard money lenders. So, we've done a deal before with a single person who lends their own money, but it is much more, it's not as loose as I would say like our normal private money. So they have higher fees, and then they want to actually do their own like appraisals and different things like that. So But most of the hard money you'll see is going to be more like institutional from a company. A lot of pros to hard money. Um, the availability, scalability, I guess those are kind of the same. Like, we try to fund all of our deals with private money, and then if for whatever reason that private money is not available, we always just kind of know that we can default to hard money because they have deep pockets generally. Um, hard money can go pretty quick. We actually funded a deal recently, I think in 7 or 9 days with the hard money company, which is pretty good. Um, they don't necessarily care about the repairs that the property needs as long as that falls within their valuation of the property. And then they also are not really they're more looking at the deals than you as a person in some cases. So they don't really, if you don't have a job but you have a good deal, they can probably work something out with you. Hard money is probably the most expensive. And again, that's kind of a trade-off for some of the pros that we talked about. But so there's the interest rate. So I think some of the hard money we're working with right now is 10, 9, 10, 11%, which on the surface doesn't sound too terrible. But they do have some additional points and fees. So a lender, for instance, might charge a 10% interest rate, which sounds good. But then maybe they want to charge 2 or 3 points. Say you don't have a job and you don't have any experience, so they're probably going to tack on a couple of points for security. And a point is 1% of the loan amount. So on a $100,000 loan, you only have a 10% interest rate, but they want to do 3 points. Well, that's an additional $3,000. And then they also have fees. They like the company that we're working with right now does, I think their flat rate fee is about $999 per loan. The process with hard money sometimes can be a little bit demanding, especially if you have a personality similar to mine. I really struggle with like organizing all the documentation and things that they need. Once you do a few loans, that smooths out a little bit. And then generally speaking, with hard money lenders, they might lend you 100% of your purchase and rehab cost, but they will hold the rehab funds back. So they will fund the purchase price, and then as you begin the rehab, and as you get things done inside the house, they will then kind of slowly release those funds to you in an attempt to make sure that they're never underwater. Volatility, hard money was pretty consistent, at least as far as I knew, up until pre-COVID. Hard money got a little bit weird when COVID happened. There was a lot of hard money lenders that just stopped lending money. And that was kind of scary. And it's not necessarily the hard money lender's fault. It's the people that they were borrowing money from to lend the money. That money kind of pulled out, so they had to pull out themselves. But that is probably not something that's very common, but I did feel like was worth noting. And then kind of along the lines of documentation, hard money lenders are going to want to do a solid verification of the condition of the home and of its value. Usually, if it's an appraisal, sometimes that can be a hindrance because of the time and the cost associated with that. A lot of hard money lenders now are switching to a BPO, which is a broker price opinion. That's a little bit easier and quicker because it's basically just somebody in their office who's qualified to look up the property online and give it a value. All right, this one's my favorite. private money, there's probably different types. I guess actually I should have gone into the types a little bit more. It's just kind of dawning on me. We work with several private money lenders right now. Um, I would say the two types that we work with are folks who are lending money to us out of some sort of retirement account, so a self-directed IRA or something similar. Um, we also work with private money lenders who are just lending us cash. That doesn't necessarily make a difference to us, but it does make a difference on the back end when there's taxes and things considered on the interest that's paid on that money. But I guess those are kind of the two different types there. A lot of pros with private money. LTV, that's loan to value. Basically, you can negotiate whatever LTV you want with a private money lender. If you need $100,000 to buy and fix a house, you could negotiate with a private money lender that they give you 200 grand. Probably not recommended, and savvy private money lenders would say no. But that is an option if negotiated. Oftentimes it's easier to use private money than some of the other options. It depends on the lender that you're working with. We work with several lenders who, sometimes you can do a deal just by a handshake. You don't necessarily need appraisals or, all those sorts of things. Private money can be very quick. If you have the right relationships and private money lenders who have liquidity, you can buy a house with somebody else's cash just as fast as you could buy it with your own. And then again, private money, depending on the private money lender, oftentimes if they trust you, they're not necessarily they probably don't know. None of my private money lenders know my credit score. I'm happy to share that with them if they ask, but they don't know that. And again, I don't have a W-2. Well, actually, I do have a W-2 now, but you don't necessarily have to have a job to borrow somebody else's money. And then kind of skipping back up, one of my favorite things about private money is just that I would much rather help somebody build their retirement account rather than just paying money to some company. Now, granted, the company is probably feeding somebody's retirement account on the back end, but I like things that are more personal. Cons of private money: it can be expensive. Again, that's flexible. I mean, if you find somebody who's willing to lend you private money at 2%, then it would not be expensive. That would be fantastic, but generally that's not the case. Right now for private money, we pay anywhere between 8 to 14%. Amount of available capital can be an issue. If you have a private money lender who has $150,000 and you purchase a house for $100,000 that needs a $50,000 rehab, well, they now are out of money until you're done with it. So we have a wide spectrum of private money lenders that we work with, anywhere between $25,000 and then up to like $1 million. And then kind of along the same lines, private money they definitely take some work to like build these relationships and find these people who are interested in passively investing in your deals. So while you might be saving a little bit of time pushing the paperwork with like a hard money lender, you're probably spending that time elsewhere building those relationships and maybe putting on a presentation like this one. And then I think the last thing is that private money, you're dealing directly with somebody's savings and retirement. So it can be emotional. We've had lenders who will lend to us, on this house because they like it, but not on that house because they don't like that one. So it can, it is emotional, and which is not always a bad thing, but it can have some variance that way that, you probably will get less emotion from like a hard money company. But private money right now is my favorite. Personal cash.
This one's my favorite, Josh.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, I think you guys do a lot of your own cash
Mm-hmm.
deals, which is great. There's a lot of pros. You'll see here, there's more pros than cons. Personal cash is very cheap. Kathy Benner does
Mm-hmm.
not pay any interest to use her own money. It's hers. The one caveat to that is some people would argue that there is an opportunity cost by not using leverage, but that's a separate discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And
your
again,
per,
Josh,
Go
I'll
ahead.
just jump in and say it really kind of depends the age of the investor. Mark and I are at a place where we're trying to retire, and so we really don't want to add more mortgages, into the mix. We're
Yeah,
all about just the cash flow coming back out of the properties.
no, yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I love it. I think it definitely makes sense. It's definitely a risk reward thing. um, but cash is extremely liquid. If you have X amount of money in your bank, then you can write a check for X amount. It's very quick. You don't need to ask anybody's permission to use your own money. It's just there waiting for you. And then personal cash, if you're when you're writing an offer on a piece of real estate, cash in your pocket is the strongest financing option that you can have. And in a market like we're dealing with right now, um, cash is very strong. Now, there are a lot of people who are opting to say that they're paying in cash, but they're actually paying with hard money. There's some discrepancy there. But your own personal cash is very strong, because then the seller knows that you don't have to go jump through many hoops. It doesn't matter the condition of the house. You don't have to ask anybody's permission. If you say you're going to buy it and you have the cash, then you should be good to go. Cons really just, scalability. If you if you're just if well you can buy as many properties as you want, as much cash as you have. So if you don't have very much cash, that's an issue for you. If you have lots of cash, that's a non-issue. um, and then kind of just like we talked about, if you're using your own cash, you are losing that advantage of leverage, which does not make sense for everybody. Right now, where I'm at and building my portfolio, leverage within reason, um, is the only way for us to kind of scale up the portfolio that we're trying to build. Now, I do look forward to the day where we're able to kind of switch back and start decreasing that leverage, or even get to the point where we're buying properties with our own cash and just kind of banking that cash flow, like Kathy said. Credit. Um, I'll be honest, this is one I do not have much experience with. There are a couple different ways to do this. There are some really good stories out there of people who bought their first house with a credit card. I love that. I can't say that I recommend it, but there's some good stories to be told with that. Heloc is a home equity line of credit. So if you have a personal residence that maybe you've lived in for 10 or 15 years, and half of your mortgage balance is paid down, you can actually get a line of credit using that equity on your primary residence as security. And then basically that becomes like cash to you. Um, so that's a great one. And then there's just a general line of credit. So you could go to your bank and ask for a line of credit. And if you meet certain criteria, they can grant that to you. And if you get a high enough amount, then you can use that to purchase real estate. Um, line of credit rates are usually very low. The qualification is higher, but the rates are pretty low, generally more like standard mortgage rates. I don't know, maybe 3 to 5% right now. But again, that's going to also that's based on you as a person in most cases. So if you have a great credit score, then you might get a lower rate. And then once you get a HELOC set up, or any line of credit, if you're approved and you meet these criteria, and you get it set up, you're really probably good. In most cases, you're good for a while. You can just kind of rinse and repeat. You're only paying interest on that money while you're using it. And then when you're not using it, you're just putting it back and it's sitting there waiting for you. Now, there are some caveats to that. In recessions, lines of credit have been known to be pulled back by the bank. Usually that is in writing in your documents. So I'd recommend reading up on that. But generally, if you're using it, within reason, and you're making your payments and so on, then you're usually good to go. Cons, like I said, that's really leaning on yourself. So they're going to want to make sure that you have good credit. And then, you're also kind of leaning on your, in the case of a HELOC, you're leaning on your primary residence. So if you're running a business, and then you're kind of leveraging your home with your business, that can sometimes get a little bit muddy the waters a little bit. But and then, yeah, obviously credit card, buying a house with a credit card can be pretty pricey, especially if you can't get back out of that in time. Sorry, I had a call there. Yep. And then lastly, our catch-all box here, creative financing. This is another one we have not gotten into a lot yet. There's a few folks here in town that are doing a lot of creative stuff. Sean Graybo is one. They do a ton of creative finance deals. We have not done much yet. We've done some subject to stuff. Are kind of looking towards the future, hopeful to see some seller finance opportunities come across. I guess we have done partnerships loosely, but so seller financing, just I guess a quick breakdown on these. Seller financing is where maybe you want to purchase a house from somebody, and they don't have a mortgage on the property, and if you pay them cash for the house, they might just take all that cash and just put it in the bank and do nothing with it. Well, the alternative is they could basically become the bank, and instead of you giving them all that cash up front, you could give them that cash, over a certain amount of time at a certain particular interest rate. So instead of that cash just sitting in their bank account, they would be earning a return on that money. Subject to there's a lot of moving parts in subject to deals. Basically, that stands for subject to the existing mortgage. So my wife actually did a deal not too long ago that was a subject to deal. The person selling the home had not made mortgage payments in about a year. They were going to flip the house. So basically, they just took over his mortgage. They got his mortgage current, so it stopped him from getting foreclosed on. They made the monthly payments while they were working on the house. And then when the house, was sold, they paid off his mortgage prior to taking the profits. So that can be a fun strategy. There are some nuances to that. When you do a property subject to, the loan stays in the previous owner's name while the title transfers to the new owner. So personally, I think it's important to get those loans paid off as quickly as possible, because you don't want to just leave somebody with this, $30, $40, $60,000 mortgage on their name just floating out there. So I personally, I don't think subject to is a great long-term strategy, but if you're doing a flip or a quick Bur deal, it can be pretty good. You can get that loan paid off in, 6 to 9 months or whatever it is. And then partnerships, I mean, there's a lot of subcategories there. You can talk about equity partnerships or, JV deals on a flip, or we've done some partnerships where with real estate agents, where part of the deal is that when the house is rehabbed, they get the listing. Even though Harvey, who's my partner, Harvey Yergin, I think he's on the call with us. Even though he's an agent, sometimes we negotiate that partnership to where the other agent can take the deal as the listing of the deal. But partnerships can be really, really helpful if you're just getting started. So, for instance, if you find a really good deal and you have no idea what the hell you're doing, you can take it to somebody more experienced and you can say, let's partner on this deal. It's a really good deal. You can give up 50% of the deal in exchange for education. That's always a good strategy. If you don't have money, kind of similarly, if you don't have any cash to do a deal, you could take this to a partner and say, hey, I'll bring the deal. You bring, the down payment and some of the rehab money, and, we can do the deal together. And then, oftentimes if you're looking for a partner, especially a partner who has some experience, they're not going to really care if you have a good credit score or a job. They're going to look at the deal specifically. And partnerships can really be infinitely scalable. There's a ton of people. I mean, even just on this call, I'm sure there's a ton of people who would be willing to take on a 50-50 deal, in a lot of cases. So pretty scalable there. Cons, there's definitely a learning curve, like when you're talking about like seller financing deals or the subject to stuff. It can be a little bit tricky to put those deals together if you don't have the experience. Of course, I guess if that's the case, then you switch back to the partnerships. Find somebody who does have experience doing subject to, split the equity with them, and then they can walk you through it for your first time. Lastly, equity is expensive. So if you're giving up 50% of a deal, if you calculated that into an interest rate, it would probably be a high number. Now, if you're learning, there are like ancillary benefits there. But I think you do get to a point in your investing career, like for us, for instance, right now, wouldn't necessarily make sense to partner on well, I guess it just depends on the deal, but like somebody who I had a guy actually recently, wanted to partner on a deal, and he had about $10,000 and wanted was considering like trying to get an equity split in a deal, and it's like, well, that doesn't necessarily um, pencil out on paper because equity is kind of expensive. Now, if we're talking about somebody who has all the money to do the deal, then that carries a little bit more weight. Um, so yeah, but giving up equity can be kind of expensive. So that is all of the strategies. Um, I guess I'll skip ahead here real quick in some of these key points that I thought of while I was putting this together. But one that we didn't really talk about was portfolio loans. Um, and in hindsight, I'm not actually sure where that fits into this, but basically a portfolio loan is like a hybrid traditional mortgage. So you're going to get it from a bank. Generally, it's not going to come from a big bank like Chase or Huntington. It's going to be from a small local bank. But they're going to have similar paperwork and due diligence, appraisals, those sorts of things. But they're not selling that loan on a secondary market, so they don't have to meet all of the normal criteria. They're probably going to want to meet some of it, but they are able to be a little bit more flexible. And then, but those can be nice, especially, scalability. We talked about you can only get 10 mortgages from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. Portfolio loans don't have to adhere to that, so they can do some more. Skipping back up, and I'll burn through these pretty quick so we can get to our Q&A real quick. A lot of these things, it just depends. There are different scenarios that make sense for one thing and other scenarios that don't make sense for a different type of loan product. There's a lot of things in this business that it just depends. So definitely try not to blanket apply any of these products. Paying back OPM, it stands for other people's money. Whenever you borrow somebody's money, it doesn't really matter whose money it is or where it came from. You have to do everything in your power to get that money back as efficiently and just like you said you were going to get it back. And it just doesn't matter if you borrow somebody's private money and you buy a bad deal and the rehab goes over budget, you have to pay people their money back. Otherwise, they're not going to let you use it again, even if it means taking a hit yourself. And then, if we're talking about traditional mortgages, that's a whole different thing. Like they'll just take your house away. And then I've seen this recently. If you have a good deal, it's easy to get a loan. If you have a house that's worth $300,000 and you buy it for $10,000, basically anybody will loan you the money. It's because it's a really good deal and it's obvious that it's a really good deal. Now, if you're purchasing a house at 80% of its value minus half of the rehab cost, nobody's going to give you a loan because the money then is not secure because it's not a good deal. It's bound to lose money. And then similarly, even with the banks, obviously with private money and then with hard money as well, all of these things get better with relationships. Whether you're dealing with a seller and you're building rapport with them, and then they agree to seller finance you the house, or even when you're dealing with a bank, if the bank has a little bit of wiggle room in what they can allow or what rate they can charge, if they like you, you're likely going to get better terms. So I think all of real estate is very much a relationship business, but I think when you get down into the lending portion of it, I think you can lean on those relationships a little bit harder. The end.
Okay, Harvey. Josh, go to the bottom of your screen where it says stop share. There we go. All right, we are all back all together now. We had some folks join in while you were presenting, so we might have some questions there, but we're going to open it up. So I am going to come over where you guys can unmute yourself. So questions, does anyone have a question for Josh? And you can unmute yourself to ask him a question. So I'm going to start it off. My first question to Josh is, what was the latest private money that you used and how did you find the private money? Tell me about the deal. What kind of a deal did you have that someone with private money was interested in doing the deal with you?
Yeah, we've got, well, I guess a couple of things. One thing that I forgot to talk about in the creative section is you can do a combination. So it is possible to do a combination hard money loan and private money loan. So there's some of that. We have one deal right now that we're working on, actually should be finishing rehab this week on market in the next week or so. That one, we actually borrowed money from a couple of different people. We had I believe four lenders that we work with who, for different scenarios, only had maybe $25,000, $35,000, $45,000. So we kind of worked with a few different people to put that one together. And then one of the other properties we have right now is a hybrid. So we used hard money, and then we funded, because the rehab funds for that hard money loan are back in escrow. So we borrowed private money to work on the rehab, to go ahead and fund that in the meantime. And then once we're finished with the rehab, we can pull those funds back from escrow. So it's kind of those two. Did you have specific questions about those?
Well, I was just wondering, what kind of room did you have in those deals that those private money lenders were willing to work with you? Or is this a long-term relationship and they just know you and say, Josh, if you say it's a good deal, we're going to go for it?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, they're definitely long-term relationships. And even in the case of the combo deal with a hard money lender, that private money loan is actually a second position mortgage. So definitely long-term relationships, but basically everything that we're buying, our formula, we're buying houses about 70% of the after repair value minus the rehab cost. So
okay.
Almost everything that we buy is fairly discounted. We are not paying full retail for these properties, so there's a good bit of security, and oftentimes we're buying even deeper than that. And that is one of my private money strategies. Anytime I work with a new private money lender, I try to time it up with a really smoking deal. Actually, one of our private money lenders, I think, is on the call with us. The first deal we ever did with her was just like, it was an absolute home run, no brainer. I think she checked it with one other person and they were like, that is a deal. And, I've done private money loans before with people too, where, they probably wish that we didn't pay them back so they could just take the house. Is they'd be better off having the duplex or whatever it is than getting repaid. So yeah, we try to buy pretty deep and really make sure there's good security.
I love that. Tell the group, how many houses do you have currently?
Currently we we own 3 houses, 2 2 rehabs in Southern Orchards that are near wrapping up. We have Harvey and I actually have our first Bur deal. That one's over just outside of Bexley. So looking forward to that. That just started rehab this week. And then we have one that went in contract today. And we have another property in contract. Actually, yeah, so we had 2 in contract like yesterday or so we've got a few things going. Harvey and I, we did 16 deals last year. We didn't keep anything. We're switching gears a little bit, and this year we're going to try to do about 25 transactions, and we'd like to keep 10 of those as rentals.
Okay, that just segues right into Debbie's comment. Debbie had sent me a note privately. She said she has to assume that Josh is primarily doing flips rather than purchasing properties for rent. Obviously, the repayment for flips are far quicker than rental properties. What is his suggestion for funding strictly rental properties, and what is his opinion of cash out refis?
Yeah, I mean, so for the rental stuff, we really are leaning on like the Bur strategy.
And explain that to some newbies.
Sure, yeah. So basically the Bur strategy, it's an acronym for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and most importantly, repeat. But kind of going back to the formula that I was talking about a minute ago, we know that a bank will give us a mortgage on a house, up to maybe 70%, 75% of the value of that house. So we reverse engineer that. So when we buy the house, we use the formula 70% of the after repair value, and then we subtract the rehab cost. So after the house is all fixed up, we only have 70% of the actual value in the house. So let's say, for instance, we have 100, the house, once it's all fixed up, it's worth 100 grand. Well, we only have $70,000 into it. So we borrowed $70,000 from somebody to buy and fix the house. So then we go to the bank. The bank says, okay, it's worth $100,000. We'll give you a mortgage for $70,000. And that's perfect because that's just the amount of money that we need to give back to the lender. And then we're able to take that same amount of capital again and deploy it into the next deal. Did that answer the question?
Yes, and that's kind of my strategy as well. When we purchase, especially since oftentimes we're using our own cash, we'll go ahead and purchase something so that we know that once we get it fixed and everything's rehabbed and we're ready to rent it, if we would have to either sell that house or pull some cash out of that deal, for whatever reason, because again, remember, we've gone to our savings account or our checking account and we've used this big sum of cash to purchase and rehab, and we don't know what the future holds. So if something comes up where we need some cash, we could pull it back out of one of those deals. And so we look at it the same way. We know that our lender, and we do use a portfolio lender, we do know that our lender will give us a good 70% out of that deal. And so if we do need cash, it's like cash in the bank. I can drive by the house and go, there's $100,000 and there's $100,000 and there's $100,000. So yeah, but again, you have to, all the factors have to align. We work really hard on keeping our credit scores up there because we never know when we might want to pull some cash out of one of those deals. And so depending on what lender you go with, they're going to look at the whole thing. They're going to look at, well, what's your credit and what's your, what's your payability that you can pay back this loan if you decide to pull the cash out and not put it into another property. So anyway, so there's a lot of factors that go into that. Somebody wants to know about my portfolio lender. I use Canal Banking in Canal, Winchester, Ohio. They're a small town bank. And as a matter of fact, I'll just jump in and tell you just a little bit of history about me, is that I purchased my first commercial building for a beauty salon. And then when I wanted to go on and purchase more commercial buildings, what I did is I portfolioed the second commercial property with the first one, and they could use my collateral out of the first one. So I didn't have to have any money down. They loaned me 100% because I had collateral, and they portfolioed the two properties together. And I ended up doing 5 commercial buildings like that. And so I ended up with five commercial salons. Over a 20-year period, I put booth rent salons in each building. So the stylists each paid me for their station. And over 20 years, my girls bought me 5 properties. So, so that's how I got started, by portfolioing. And so I used all bank money at that time. And it's only been since then that we started using our own funds to purchase. Derek has mentioned the buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat, the Bur rental property investment strategy made simple by David Green. If anybody wants to make a note of that, that's by David Green.
Yeah, that's a Bigger Pockets publishing book. I don't think I have yet, but quick plug for Bigger Pockets, especially their publishing company. All of their books are fantastic. So I can't say enough things about their books. I haven't read them all, but I'm close.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. All right. Derek says on Amazon or biggerpockets.com. So yeah, so check that out. Any other questions for Josh?
I had one. This is John.
Go ahead, John.
Appreciate it. So we're close to closing on a fourplex as well as a duplex, and we're planning on keeping that for rentals. So I appreciate the conversations that I've been listening into so far. It's been kind of part of the whole process, and I've been taking notes. So you guys are awesome. Freebie stuff is phenomenal. The one thing I was curious about, we're going to have, my guess is going to be about 50 to 60K available here in a few months. And how would myself and my wife get into private money, being a lender?
Yeah, that's a great question. Usually what I recommend is connecting with another person who does private money lending. I mean, I can tell you about private money lending from my perspective, but I personally do not lend my own money. I just borrow money. So that's usually what I tell people. I know a handful of people, obviously, who do private money lend in various positions through retirement accounts, or whether that be their own cash. That really probably is one of the big levers. You probably also would want to talk to like a CPA or whoever your tax professional is.
Okay.
Because lending, and I'm not a CPA, tax professional, attorney, none of that. Lending out of a retirement account is nice because you can defer taxes. Depending on your tax bracket, if you're just lending cash, you might be getting a 10% return, but then if you're paying 4% or whatever it is back in taxes, then that's not as lucrative. But then it becomes an issue of liquidity. If you think that if you want to keep that 50 grand liquid for the next couple of years, then it probably doesn't make sense to sock it away in an IRA. So yeah, feel free to shoot me a message. I'll post my information here in the chat. I think it's typed. Here we go. Yeah, shoot me a message and I can hook you up with some other people who lend. I can tell you for sure there's one lender on the call specifically who lends $60,000. So
Okay.
I have a suggestion. There are recorded webinars on the websites of the custodial companies that handle self-directed IRAs, self-directed accounts. Advanta.com, Quest.com, Equity Trust Company, I think it is, etc.com. And just for the education part, you know, they've done some webinars on private lending and due diligence. So.
Those are all great points. Yes. Can you tap that into the chat box, or are you on a phone?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah. If you could. Now,
Sure.
don't forget, when you go to the chat box, when you see where you're going to type a message, you'll see 3 little dots to the right. If you click on that, there's a button there to save the chat. So once information goes into that chat box, you can save it. Anyone else have any comments or questions for Josh? I think we lost Harvey on there. I think Harvey disappeared.
Maybe he had to go get some more sun. I think I just want to make like kind of one last point. I think, and maybe it's like a challenge or something. You know, there are, and I actually just clicked through, there are private money lenders on this call. There, I think at one point was various other types of lenders on this call. I don't know everybody here. There is an abundance of money in the marketplace right now. Funding deals, if you have a good deal, funding the deal is not as difficult as you think. So I guess that my challenge to you guys is, if you want to learn about a particular funding strategy, or you're looking for a type of funding, I just call people. You know, if you want to try a portfolio lender, Kathy just mentioned one, call them, go into their office, meet with them, see what their rates are, have a conversation with them. And similarly with private money lenders, I can tell you the private money lenders who are on this call right now, but honestly, it wouldn't do you any good, because if they don't know who you are and have a relationship with you and know, like, and trust you, they're not, just by getting their phone number doesn't mean you get their money. So, you know, just reach out to people, connect with people. And if you ask for what you need often enough, you'll find it.
Absolutely. And Addison has asked a question. She wants to know, Josh, where you actually find your deals. Now, I know that we talked about finding last month, but where do you find your deals?
We get them from this caveman.
We buy ugly houses.
That's right. So yeah, so we do a significant amount of marketing direct to seller. So that's where we get a decent portion of our deals. We also Harvey and I do have a full-time acquisitions person. Her name is Christy Hawkins. She analyzes basically every wholesale deal that gets put out. So that's a chore, but so we do buy from wholesalers, and we're trying to look into other strategies. We keep an eye on the MLS, although we all know those deals are very competitive. There's a lot of other eyes there. But I would say the majority of our deals are coming from our own marketing, most of which is direct mail. A lot of mail.
Perfect. Derek says that Broad Financial handles solo 401k for self-employed investors. So again, that's in the chat. Don't forget to save the chat. Well, I want to thank Josh for coming on. Thank you so much. This has been very informative. He's going to send over to me his PowerPoint presentation, so I will have the link to that. I will put that in the Happy House Hunters. Again, visit the Happy House Hunters group on Facebook. Also, the Happy House Hunters group on meetup.com. We're located in both those places to find us. And then again, we have the Mastermind. If anyone is interested, we break it down and get very involved with our mastermind members in helping them find the deals, fund the deals, fix the deals. We go through the whole process. Even in our membership site, not only do we have all of these free meetup calls recorded, but we have all of the mastermind calls recorded. We have all the forms that you need, such as contracts, lease agreements, 3-day notices, walkthrough checklist. All of that is also found in the mastermind site. And then last but not least, we have a whole resource section of plumbers and electricians and dumpsters and just anything, tree folks, landscapers, anything that you might need. We have a whole resource section as well. So don't forget to check that out. That is under Kathy Benner International Academy under the Happy House Hunters Mastermind. So we're going to hang on for a moment. Everybody's saying nice job, Josh. And yes, it was a very nice job. Thank you so much. And if there's any other questions, we'll sit tight for just a minute or two. Any last comments from anyone?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I have a little issue. It may or may not relate to what is happening today, but I have a small business going on, real estate business going on. I had to set up a company, and the financial year is over, and I'm actually looking for a tax, how do you call it, a tax person to help me prepare my tax for my business.
Okay.
And I have been on this platform for a while, and I have been with this group for a while. I thought, let me just put it out there. If any of you know someone who is good, or someone you've been working with a while and or for some time, particularly you, Kathy, I know you've been in the business for a long while. If you can recommend anybody to me, or if there's anybody on this platform who knows someone who can help me with my taxes, I'll be very
yes, as a matter of fact, again, looking in the chat, Josh says Nate Bush Tax Company. Debbie says Delaney and Company in Lancaster does real estate taxes. So there's a couple there in the chat. Again, when you open up the chat box, go to the 3 little dots there toward the lower right corner and click on those, and you can save all that information that's in the chat. That way you don't have to try to write it all down. I personally have a paperless system that I teach, that I use in my office with my real estate. I have 30 doors that I'm holding now as rental properties, and I do all of my own bookkeeping and all of my own taxes. And so I do not use a tax person, but I'm not doing a lot of lending and borrowing where I'm trading a lot of money or even a lot of deals. I might purchase 1 or 2 rental properties a year, rehab those myself, and then keep them, buy and hold, and keep those as rentals, and then just keep building my portfolio of rentals. And so my taxes is, for those of you that have rental properties, my taxes consist of 1 Schedule C and several Schedule E's, because each rental property goes on a Schedule E, and that's really the extent of my taxes. So, so yes, there are some tax accountants. If you're doing a lot of deals and you're moving a lot of funds around, you do need to have a professional person help you with that, so you don't get into trouble or in over your head on those. So I will double check in our group, but if anybody else has any suggestions, put it in the chat for us.
Okay,
Somebody
thank you.
Somebody else said a second for Nate Bush, so it sounds like Nate
that's
Bush.
what I was about to say. I saw a second for Nate Bush, so
yeah. So make a note. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That sounds like a good place to start. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone for coming. It is 7:18, so we've gone a little past the hour, but again, thank you, Josh. I appreciate you. I will be posting the video in the Happy House Hunters Facebook page. There's a section there in the Facebook page that I will put that link, and also I'll put it in the Meetup group. I'll just put it out in an email to everyone, so you can find the replay. And then again, don't forget, if you're interested in the mastermind, just connect with me. So with that, we're going to say goodbye, and thank you everyone for coming.
Thanks for listening.
All right, and we will see you soon. Thank you, Josh.